The phone rang loud and clear as I stood elbow-deep in a bucket of white roses, cutting off thorns just as my grandmother taught me. "Bloom and petal, this is Maya speaking," I announced as I took the phone from my ear and shoulder. It was Linda, the woman from 3 houses down. She was cheerful but insistent, as usual. "Maya, honey, are you helping with the school fundraiser? You know, for Emily's soccer team." I smiled to myself, wiping my hands on my apron. Linda and I were not particularly close, aside from our occasional morning chats and her daughter's visits to my front yard. "Of course, anything for the kids," I remarked. She seemed genuinely touched, assuring me she would bring me a flyer and hanging up soon after. I scarcely thought of it again, until exactly a month later on a Tuesday morning. As usual, the shop was filled to the brim with orders for my upcoming Valentine's Day arrangements. Sarah, my only employee, was busy outside preparing the deliveries while I dealt with the custom orders in my office. Everything was running smoothly and efficiently as it always did until Thomas, the hardware store owner, flagged me down in the parking lot. "Hey Maya, I heard you were on the committee for the school fundraiser," he began cheerfully. "Biggest donation by far, from what I heard." I blinked in surprise. "I was." He chuckled, assuming I was being modest. "Yeah, the check was for $3,000, and Linda said you were a saint for doing it." My stomach twisted painfully at his words, and I nearly dropped my phone. $3,000. I echoed numbly. Thomas became quiet all of a sudden. He must have sensed my discomfort, for he excused himself from my company shortly. I practically ran back into the shop, my phone still in my hand. I called the school right there and then, demanding a receipt for the check. The woman who answered was named Mrs. Patterson, and she was very polite about the whole ordeal. She sent me the receipt via email as I requested, and I promptly opened the link when I got back to the shop. My hands shook as I read the document, growing paler with each passing second. There was my name, my very own signature, and the amount of the check. The number was even right there, bold and clear, and I knew without a doubt whose it belonged to. That night I tossed and turned, haunted by the thought of someone stealing from me. I immediately contacted my bank the next day, and they told me the check had officially cleared 3 weeks ago. The signature, they said, was a perfect replica of mine, aside from a few minor flaws. Someone must have seen me write the check at some point. The next morning, I ran into the shop 2 hours early, switching on my computer as I did every morning. I opened a new document and got to work right then and there. My grandma always told me that truth would stick out like a sore thumb in the end. She also said that it always leaves footprints behind, so I only had to find them. I printed out copies of my bank account records for the past 3 months and laid them out on the counter in front of me in an organized manner. That is when I saw it. My eyes scanned down the neatly written documents until they landed on precisely what I was looking for. Checks. The dates were all there, as well as my checkbook number, matching the one that was supposedly stolen. The checkbook itself was in my desk drawer. Every check was there, accounted for and safe. All of my checks, aside from one, were accounted for, and the one that was missing had already been used. How was I supposed to know someone stole it? "Sarah," I called, and she walked into the shop a few minutes later in response. She looked at my checkbook in confusion when I handed it to her. "What's this about?" "I need you to do me a favor," I said quietly. "Can you look through every order we received and every visitor we had logged in the past month?" "Why?" Sarah asked. What's this about? Someone stole $3000 from me, I stated, and I have a sinking feeling it was Linda. Sarah immediately turned pale. Linda, the woman who brings you those chocolate chip cookies every Christmas. The same, I muttered darkly. Sarah helped me sort through every detail we had about our visitors and suppliers. Unfortunately, we did not have much information aside from the few cameras we had in the shop. Linda had walked in freely when she came to pick up the flyer, and I was in my office the entire time. The camera above the register faced forward, not back, so there was no way of seeing who entered or exited the office. All Sarah could tell me was that Linda had come in about a month ago, when I was out at the flower market. She said she wanted to pick up the flyer you promised me for the fundraiser. Sarah relayed. So I told her to wait in your office for 5 minutes while I took care of a customer. My heart nearly stopped. She was in my office. Yes, Sarah replied, eyes wide with worry. I'm so sorry, Maya. I had no idea she would do something like that. I should have taken better care of my things, I admitted. I was just being so careless, and she saw my checkbook. Linda could have just taken a check from my drawer. It would have been easy. Taking my checkbook and forging my signature with such precision, however, was not. Did you see her take anything? I questioned. Sarah shook her head. Not really. No cameras, remember. Linda could have simply walked away with one of my checks without me knowing. Forging my signature was a more precise task, though. It took talent and practice to pull it off. I will go to the school today, I said the next afternoon. Perhaps I could speak to Mr. Harrison. He is the treasurer after all, and I think it would help to hear it from him. Mr. Harrison was a kind old man who everyone respected in the community. He had several children and grandchildren, and he always had a soft spot for me and my shop. He looked at the receipt in confusion when he got there. Linda brought me the check herself, he said. She said you wanted to remain anonymous about your generous donation, but she insisted on stating your name at the board meeting. She seemed delighted to help, he added. Did she happen to show you and sign anything? I asked him quietly. No, she did not, he replied, shaking his head. Linda said you had already sent the money and that she would be more than happy to deliver it to us. He paused briefly before adding, besides, you were very busy at the shop. I nodded my thanks before heading back home. My frustration was growing by the day, but I still needed more evidence to convict Linda for stealing my money. It all made too much sense in hindsight. Linda needed the money, and I had given it to her by mistake. You think Linda's desperate for money? I asked Mrs. Chen, another neighbor, over a pot of steaming tea the following evening. I heard her husband lost his job 6 months ago. He was laid off, yes, but he has not been searching for a new one either, Mrs. Chen replied, her voice low. Linda was always a greedy woman, but this recent turn of events has only made it worse. Linda's greed had gotten her into trouble, but it did not change the fact that I trusted her. She used my goodwill against me, and now all I had to do was ensure that she did not get away with it. Did she ever come by your house? I asked Mrs. Chen. I think it would help me to know what she was doing in my office. Mrs. Chen looked at me with pity in her eyes. She rarely comes by unless she has something in mind. She knows you always leave the office door unlocked, so it did not take her long to figure out the rest. I returned home that night and prepared a small plan of my own. I needed Linda to feel safe enough to confess, and I would give her that opportunity. At the same time, Linda needed to understand that she would not get away with her actions so easily. I needed evidence pointing the woman toward her crime, and I would obtain it if it killed me. My plan was simple, but it would take a few days to set up properly. I had to ensure that not only would Linda feel safe enough to admit what she did, but that she would not escape with her life intact. I needed enough information for her to feel cornered, but I had to be careful not to hurt her reputation in the process. Everything I said had to be as innocent as the flowers I sold at my shop. That Saturday morning, I invited Linda out for coffee at my shop. She eagerly accepted the offer, and I had no idea what was on her mind when she arrived. "You look tired," she remarked as she took a seat across from me. "I have been busy with the wedding season," I responded with a smile. "How is everything else?" She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and concern before replying, "Oh, fine. The fundraiser was a great success. The girls were so happy to hear their names announced at the ceremony." "I am glad to hear that," I replied. "I was thinking of doing something larger next year, but I am sure you will be there for the community events as well." I paused before adding, "Linda, if you are interested in doing something bigger next year, perhaps we could update our records for the accounting book." She looked at me with wide eyes. "You mean the check for the school?" "Yes, I think it was placed under the wrong tab in my accounting book," I replied casually. "The bank told me to bring in a copy of the original payment receipt, so I will send it to you by Monday." I watched Linda's face carefully as I spoke. "You always do well with the paperwork, so I am sure you will find the file no problem." She smiled weakly and nodded her head. "Of course I will find the file. I always do." "Good," I said, studying her expression carefully. "I always knew I could count on you." Linda excused herself moments later, and I watched her retreating form with apprehension. The bait was out, and I only had to wait for the hook to come down. I secretly installed a camera in my office that Sunday afternoon. I told Sarah about my suspicions regarding Linda, and she helped me keep the office door unlocked for her. Sure enough, she arrived again on Monday afternoon while I was out at the flower market. Sarah called me right away. "She is in your office, Maya. She is searching through your desk." I sighed in frustration, but remained calm. "Let her take whatever she wants. I have everything I need in case she does not confess." 2 hours later, I looked through the footage and saw Linda rummaging through my paperwork. She stole a blank check from my drawer, most likely intending to replace the one she had taken. Linda also took a few letters with my signature on them, practicing her forgery. I had the woman I trusted right where I needed her. She would try to cover her tracks again, and I would catch her. Linda might have felt safe enough to do what she did, but I still had proof of her crime. It was only a matter of time before her greed caught up with her. I called Linda that evening and told her that I had scheduled a meeting with the school board on Wednesday. "I need everything sorted out by then," I reminded her. "Do you think you could bring me the records?" Her voice trembled slightly as she replied, "Of course, I will bring them. I will deliver them to you by the morning." The next 3 days were long and tedious as I waited for her to confess. I wanted to call the women at the school board and tell them what Linda had done, but I still needed more evidence for her to incriminate herself. The few pieces of proof I had were not enough to convict Linda or ruin her reputation. Tuesday night, I sent Linda a text message telling her that I knew what she had done. "Please come clean before Wednesday, Linda. I do not want to do this." Her reply was simple: "I do not know what you are talking about." Linda had already crossed the line, But I knew I still had to give her one last chance to confess. The morning of Wednesday, I entered the school board room and took a seat in the front. Linda was there as well, her eyes darting around the room anxiously. The walls smelled of old paper, and I was determined to make sure Linda would never feel so comfortable in my office again. Mr. Harrison called the board members to order. We are here to finalize this year's community sponsorship acknowledgments. I raised my hand, signaling for his attention. The room fell silent, and all eyes were on me. Linda's gaze was fixed on me the entire time. She must have known what was coming. We need to address this year's check donations first, I announced. Linda's face was pale, and she looked as if she was about to say something. 3 weeks ago, someone stole $3,000 from me. A check was taken from my office, and my signature was forged to pay it. Gasps of shock filled the room as I continued. I have camera footage showing Linda in my office the day after the check was stolen. I have evidence that shows Linda stole a blank check from my office to replace the one that was taken. I also have video footage of Linda searching through my documents in my office. I paused before playing Linda's recording on my phone. I have to find that check. I need to find that check. I have to replace it before she finds out. Linda's voice grew louder as she spoke on the recording. Her eyes widened in horror as the recording played. I am sorry. My husband lost his job. We were going to lose the house. Emily needed new cleats. I did not know what else to do. Linda's voice trailed off as she sank back in her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Mr. Harrison looked at Linda with a mix of sadness and anger. The school board members watched the woman who had served them for so many years, who had donated her time and resources to help the community. Everything she did was out of desperation. One of the members said, I understand where she was coming from. I do not know if I will be able to forgive her for what she did. I replied, Linda, please know that this will not be easy for me. Stealing from me was not a good choice, and I cannot forgive her for doing it. The rest of the board members nodded in agreement. I looked at Linda and sighed. This will be a difficult time for everyone, but it will all be worth it in the end. Linda looked up at me with tear-stained cheeks. Are you going to turn me in? If you do what I ask of you, then no. I replied, you will return all the money you stole, plus interest. You will post an apology notice at the school, and you will resign from all the school committee positions. This will be your punishment for stealing from me. Linda nodded her head. And there will be no more trouble if I do what you ask of me. But there is one more thing. I told Linda, you will never mention my name or business again. You and I are only neighbors. The board members agreed to this, and Linda signed her repayment contract right then and there. I watched as she walked away, and I wished there was something I could do to help her. That night, I sat in my shop surrounded by my beautiful flowers. Sarah brought me a pot of tea and asked me how I was doing. I told her the truth. I was not happy, but at least I knew I did the right thing. I did not ruin Linda's life, but I made sure she would not be able to do it to someone else again. Linda left town about a year later. I heard she found a new job in the city, and I hope she learned from her mistakes. After all, kindness is a beautiful thing, but it is important to protect what we have. Trust must be earned, and things must be protected. After all, some people will take advantage of your kindness. Always protect your things, and be wary of who you let in. That was the most important lesson I learned from this experience, and it is something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. As for me, Bloom and Petal carries on, thriving and healthy. And when someone comes in asking for a favor, I always smile and say, "Let me think about it."